The morning had started like any other, with a quiet sense of routine that made the young woman feel both safe and trapped at the same time. She moved through the hallways with a practiced calm, carrying trays and making sure every detail of her service was perfect. She had been working at this grand venue for months, and she knew the rhythm of the place better than anyone. The polished floors, the gleaming silverware, and the soft hum of the chandeliers created a world that seemed almost magical. But it was a world that demanded perfection and left little room for personal expression. She had always loved music. From the moment she could remember, the piano had been a source of comfort and joy. In her small apartment, the old upright piano stood like a silent friend, waiting for her fingers to bring it to life. Music was the one thing that could make her forget the long hours and the strict rules of her job. It was private, safe, and hers alone. She had kept it a secret from everyone at work, knowing that showing any kind of personal talent might be frowned upon. The rules were clear. Serve, do not distract, do not stand out. Yet, the longing to play was always there, simmering quietly beneath the surface. Today, however, was different. The manager had given her a direct order that made her stomach tighten. She was told to serve at a special event, a gathering that promised a large crowd, important guests, and an atmosphere of formal expectation. This was not just any day. She could feel the tension building as she prepared, straightening her uniform and smoothing down her hair. The order was simple, but the weight of it pressed on her shoulders. Serve the guests flawlessly, do not make mistakes, and above all, do not draw attention to yourself. The message was clear, and yet, it left her with a sense of unease. The event hall was filled with glittering lights and soft music, but her eyes were drawn to the piano at the far end of the room. It was an old grand piano, polished and gleaming, standing as if it had been waiting just for her. Her heart skipped a beat. Seeing it made a small spark of excitement rise within her, but she pushed it down quickly. She was here to serve, not perform. The thought of touching the keys, even for a moment, was both thrilling and terrifying. Guests arrived, their laughter and chatter filling the space with a lively energy. She moved among them, carrying trays of drinks and appetizers, nodding politely, and responding with practiced smiles. She noticed the way some of the guests paused to admire the piano, their eyes lingering on it with curiosity. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to sit down and play, to let the music flow and capture the attention of everyone in the room. The thought was intoxicating, but she quickly reminded herself of her duty. As she continued her service, she found herself stealing glances at the piano, imagining the sound of the keys beneath her fingers. Each glance brought a mix of longing and fear. What if she made a mistake? What if she was caught doing something she was not supposed to do? The risk was real, but the desire to play was stronger than she expected. She realized that she had been living in a state of quiet restraint for so long that even the thought of expressing herself openly felt dangerous. The manager's eyes followed her across the room, a constant reminder of the rules she had to follow. She felt the weight of expectation pressing down on her, but at the same time, there was a strange sense of freedom in knowing that she had a choice. The piano called to her, not with words, but with the promise of release, of letting go of all the tension and showing a part of herself that had been hidden for so long. She found a quiet corner, pretending to adjust something on a tray, and allowed herself a brief moment to breathe. The music inside her was growing louder, and she knew that she could not ignore it forever. She thought about the people who would never know her talent, the notes that would remain unplayed, and the joy that she had kept to herself for too long. The idea of touching the piano, even just for a few moments, became an almost irresistible urge. Her mind raced with possibilities. What if she played something small just to test the waters? What if she could capture the attention of even one person in the crowd, make them pause and listen, make them feel what she had always felt when she played alone? The fear was still there, but it was mingled with excitement, a sense of daring that she had never allowed herself to feel before. She realized that this moment, this event, might be the only chance she had to break free from the invisible chains that bound her. The guests were beginning to settle, their conversations forming a gentle hum that filled the room. She moved among them, careful to follow her instructions, but her eyes kept drifting to the piano. It seemed to beckon her, urging her to take a risk, to step beyond the role she had been assigned. She could feel her fingers twitching, imagining the sensation of the keys beneath them, the sound of music filling the hall. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine the reaction of the crowd. Would they be surprised? Would they smile or be amazed? The thought of sharing her music with strangers, of letting them see a part of herself that had been hidden for so long, was both thrilling and terrifying. She felt a rush of courage, the kind that comes from knowing that the opportunity to express oneself might not come again. As she continued her service, she noticed a small gap in the crowd near the piano. It was a fleeting opportunity, but it was enough. She could imagine slipping away for just a moment, playing a few notes, and returning to her duties before anyone noticed. The idea gave her a sense of control, a way to balance her responsibility with her desire to express herself. She adjusted the tray in her hands, took a deep breath, and began to move toward the piano. Each step was careful, deliberate, and filled with anticipation. She felt the tension in her shoulders ease slightly as she approached, the familiar excitement of music rising within her. The world seemed to narrow to just her and the piano, the glittering lights and the murmuring crowd fading into the background. Finally, she stood before the instrument, her fingers hovering above the keys. The moment was charged with possibility, a delicate balance between fear and exhilaration. She thought about all the times she had dreamed of playing in front of others, all the moments when she had imagined the music filling a room, bringing joy or stirring emotion. The chance was here and it was real. With a deep breath, she let her fingers fall on the keys. The first note sounded clear and confident, cutting through the soft hum of conversation. She played another, then another, the melody flowing naturally, almost as if it had been waiting for this very moment. She felt a surge of emotion, a sense of release, as the music took over, guiding her hands and filling the hall with sound. For a brief moment, everything else disappeared. She was no longer just a server at a formal event. She was a musician, sharing a piece of herself with the world. The piano became an extension of her emotions, each note carrying a fragment of her story, her joy, her longing, and her courage. The music was alive, and she felt it coursing through her, connecting her to everyone in the room. Even as the guests continued their conversations, some began to notice, turning their heads and pausing, drawn by the unexpected sound. The piano had a voice that could not be ignored, and slowly, the room began to quiet, the chatter fading as more and more people focused on the music. She felt a mixture of relief and exhilaration, knowing that she had taken the first step toward sharing her hidden talent. The moment was fleeting, but it was enough to ignite a spark. She returned to her duties after a few notes, her hands still tingling from the touch of the keys. She moved among the guests, her heart still racing, her mind filled with the memory of the music she had played. The event continued, but for her, something had changed. The rules had not vanished, but she had found a way to honor herself, even briefly, and that made all the difference. As the day went on, she continued her service with renewed energy. The memory of those few notes lingered, a secret triumph that belonged to her alone. She knew that the opportunity to play again might not come so soon, but she also knew that she had discovered something important: courage, self-expression, and the power of music to connect and transform. The day had begun with a simple order, but it had opened the door to something much greater, and she felt ready to face whatever came next with a newfound sense of possibility and hope. As the event continued, the young woman moved through the crowd with the trays of drinks and plates, trying to focus on her duties. Yet, the sound of the piano lingered in her mind like a persistent echo that refused to fade. Each note she had played earlier seemed to call to her, reminding her of the power she felt in that fleeting moment. She could not stop thinking about the possibilities of what might happen if she let herself play more openly. The thought scared her, but it also excited her, like a flame flickering in the dark. The guests had begun to settle into their conversations, some of them laughing softly, others speaking in low tones. She noticed that a few heads turned toward the piano, drawn by the lingering notes she had already played. It was small, almost imperceptible, but she could sense the curiosity in the room. The realization made her heart race. Perhaps they wanted to hear more. Perhaps they had sensed something extraordinary in the music. She paused for a moment, pretending to straighten a napkin on a table, and allowed herself to glance at the piano. It stood there, polished and gleaming, waiting quietly as if it had known she would return. Her hands twitched almost involuntarily, remembering the feel of the keys beneath her fingers. The sensation was familiar and comforting, yet it brought a pang of fear. She had always played in the privacy of her small apartment, never in front of anyone. She had hidden her talent, worried about judgment, or perhaps about being seen as different. Yet here she was, in a grand hall, and the temptation was impossible to ignore. The urge to play grew stronger with every passing moment, and she found herself weighing the consequences of giving in to that desire. While she continued her work, she remembered the countless hours spent practicing the piano in solitude. Each piece she had learned had its own story, its own emotion, and she could almost feel them all pressing against her from the past, asking to be expressed. The music had always been her escape, her secret joy, but now it seemed to demand more than she had ever given it. It wanted to be shared, and she felt the weight of that expectation pressing gently but firmly on her shoulders. The manager walked past, giving a sharp nod in her direction, a reminder that her duty was service first, performance second. She felt the tension of responsibility tighten around her chest, but it did not extinguish the spark within her. She realized that the choice was hers alone, to continue blending into the background, or to take a chance, risking judgment and error for the sake of something bigger than herself. Her heart pounded with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. For the first time, she understood that talent, when left hidden, could become a quiet longing, and that to ignore it entirely was to deny a part of who she was. As she moved through the crowd, her eyes kept drifting to the piano. She noticed a small gap in the guests, a momentary opening where she could approach without drawing immediate attention. The thought of seizing that moment made her breath catch. It was a delicate balance between risk and reward, between the rules she had always followed and the desire she had kept locked away for years. Her fingers brushed against the edge of the tray she carried, steadying herself as she imagined the touch of the piano keys once more. She recalled the first time she had fallen in love with the piano. The old instrument in her childhood home had been battered and worn, but it had spoken to her in a way that nothing else ever did. She remembered the way the sound seemed to rise from deep within, carrying every emotion she could not put into words. Joy, sadness, excitement, longing. All were contained in the notes she played, and each piece was a reflection of her soul. That memory, so vivid and real, fueled her courage. It reminded her that the music was not just skill or practice, but a part of her very being. Slowly, she made her way to the piano, careful to appear as if she were only adjusting something nearby. Her heart raced, and she could feel the heat rising to her cheeks. The keys were smooth under her fingers, the polished surface cool to the touch. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, allowing herself to breathe and feel the rhythm of the music she longed to create. She reminded herself that no one could take this away from her. The moment belonged to her, and she had the right to embrace it. She began with a soft, tentative melody, a simple tune that had been a favorite of hers since childhood. The first notes floated gently through the room, subtle enough not to cause alarm but captivating enough to draw attention. She opened her eyes slightly and noticed the first few guests turning toward her, their expressions shifting from casual conversation to interest. A small smile appeared on her lips. The response, even this small, was enough to encourage her. She allowed the melody to grow, adding a little more complexity, letting the notes flow naturally from her fingers. The music began to fill the room, cutting through the hum of conversation. She felt a strange mixture of vulnerability and strength, the knowledge that she was exposing a hidden part of herself to the world, yet also feeling the thrill of doing so. Each note seemed to carry a fragment of her story, a piece of the countless hours she had spent alone with the piano. She could sense the audience's curiosity growing, and it fueled her courage. The fear that had gripped her moments ago began to soften, replaced by a quiet determination. She noticed a few children pausing in their play, eyes wide with wonder. A couple of older guests leaned back in their chairs, listening intently. The change in the atmosphere was subtle but undeniable. The room was starting to focus on the music, even if only unconsciously. She felt a deep satisfaction in this small but powerful shift. The music was working, drawing people together, creating a shared moment of attention and emotion. With each passing minute, her confidence grew. The melodies she had kept hidden for so long were now alive in the air around her. She played with emotion, letting the music express what words never could. The hum of conversation faded further, replaced by the gentle resonance of the piano. She felt the connection between herself and the audience, even if most of them did not know her story. In that moment, she realized that music had the power to bridge the distance between people, to communicate feelings and experiences that were universal. A gentle smile of recognition from one of the guests encouraged her further. It was a silent acknowledgement of the beauty of what she was creating. She allowed herself a brief moment of pride, not in the approval itself, but in the courage it had taken to share something so deeply personal. She understood that true expression required risk, and that hiding her talent had been a form of self-denial. The realization strengthened her resolve to continue, at least for as long as the moment allowed. As she continued, she noticed that some of the staff had begun to glance in her direction, a mixture of curiosity and surprise on their faces. Her heart skipped a beat. She knew she was taking a risk, but the music had a pull that was irresistible. Each note was a step toward freedom, a release from the self-imposed limitations she had carried for years. She felt alive in a way that she had never experienced while serving, a sense of purpose and joy that extended beyond the simple duties of the day. She began to experiment slightly, introducing variations and embellishments to the simple tune. The sound was richer now, more intricate, yet still accessible. She could feel the room responding, even subtly, to the changes in rhythm and melody. The audience's attention was gradually shifting, and she sensed that she was holding them, if only momentarily, in the space of her music. Each note became an invitation, a conversation without words, and she felt a deep satisfaction in the dialogue she was creating. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to reflect on the journey that had brought her here. The hours spent practicing alone, the moments of doubt and fear, the careful concealment of her talent. They all seemed to converge in this instant. The piano had become a vessel for her experiences, her emotions, and her courage. She realized that the act of sharing, even in this small way, was transformative. It had changed the room, changed the energy, and most importantly, changed her. The music continued, flowing naturally from her fingers. She was no longer thinking about the rules or the duties she had been assigned. She was present, fully immersed in the moment, and aware of the subtle yet profound effect her playing was having on the people around her. The atmosphere in the hall had shifted. There was a quiet attention, a shared experience that connected everyone in the space, however briefly. It was a feeling she had longed for, and now it was real. Eventually, the tune softened, the final notes lingering in the air like a gentle echo. She lifted her hands from the keys and allowed herself a small sigh of relief. The moment had passed, but its impact remained. She returned to her duties, carrying trays and responding to guests with renewed energy, a quiet sense of pride and satisfaction simmering within her. She had taken a step into a new world, one where her talent was not hidden, and she understood that this was only the beginning. The piano had awakened something in her, a recognition of her own courage and the joy of sharing her gift, even in the smallest of moments. The young woman returned to her duties after her first few notes had filled the room, but she could feel the music still pulsing in her veins. Each step she took among the guests carried a renewed energy, and she noticed small changes around her. A few people glanced her way with curiosity, and some even paused mid-conversation, their ears drawn to the faint echo of the melody she had played. She felt a quiet thrill, realizing that even a brief touch of her music had made a difference in the room. Her mind kept returning to the piano, and she found herself imagining the keys under her fingers, the sound of each note carrying her emotions out into the world. The idea of returning to play again was irresistible, and she began to weigh the risks and the possibilities. The manager was nearby, and she could feel the weight of authority pressing down, reminding her that she was there to serve first, to follow instructions without deviation. Yet, the call of her talent was stronger than the fear of reprimand. It was a strange, exhilarating tug-of-war within her, and she realized that she could not ignore it any longer. She moved carefully, pretending to adjust something on a table while her eyes kept checking the piano. The room was settling, the initial excitement of the event dimming into a more subdued hum of conversation. It was the perfect moment, fleeting but enough. She could slip away for a few minutes without causing alarm. Her hands trembled slightly, a mixture of fear and excitement coursing through her. She reminded herself that this was her moment, and that the music had a right to be heard, just as much as her responsibilities demanded her attention. As she approached the piano, the polished keys gleamed under the soft lighting, almost inviting her to play. She could feel her heart racing, every beat echoing the tension and anticipation within her. For a brief instant, she hesitated, questioning whether she should really take the risk. The memory of the quiet, hidden hours spent practicing, of the songs that had always been hers and hers alone, gave her courage. She realized that music was not meant to be confined. It was meant to be shared, and she had the power to do it. She sat down slowly, letting her fingers hover above the keys. The world around her seemed to fade, leaving only her and the piano. She started with a simple, soft melody, one that she knew well, letting the notes flow naturally. The sound filled the hall, weaving through the conversations and capturing the attention of those nearby. She noticed a few heads turning, guests pausing in their movements, their expressions shifting from casual engagement to focused attention. The response, subtle yet powerful, bolstered her confidence. Encouraged by the small but tangible reaction, she allowed herself to play more freely. The music grew richer, more expressive, as she let her emotions guide her hands. The melody became a reflection of her inner world, each note carrying fragments of her past, her dreams, and her courage. The guests began to notice more clearly, some leaning forward in their seats, others standing quietly, drawn to the unexpected performance. She could feel the energy in the room shift, the subtle transformation from a casual gathering to a space filled with shared attention and appreciation. She continued to play, experimenting with variations and embellishments, letting the music breathe and flow naturally. Each note seemed to resonate not just in the room, but within herself, reinforcing the sense of connection between her and the audience. She could feel the eyes of some guests on her, and instead of fear, she felt a deep satisfaction in sharing her talent. The music was no longer a private escape. It was a bridge, connecting her with people she had never met, evoking emotions without words. The manager's presence was still felt, a reminder that she was technically off duty, yet the pull of the piano was irresistible. She understood the risk, but she also understood the unique power of this moment. It was a rare chance to step out of the role she had always been assigned, to express herself in a way that had been forbidden or impossible before. The thrill of doing something daring, of stepping beyond the boundaries of her daily life, filled her with a sense of liberation that she had never experienced. Guests began to respond more noticeably, some whispering to one another, others simply sitting in quiet awe. She felt a warmth spreading through her, a combination of pride, joy, and relief. The piano had transformed the room, and she had become a focal point without intending to. The music carried her courage outward, creating an invisible bond between her and the audience. Each note was a statement, a declaration of her presence and her ability to bring beauty into the space. She let herself sink deeper into the music, allowing her emotions to guide her fingers. Memories of late nights spent practicing alone, the frustration and joy of learning new pieces, the comfort of the familiar keys under her touch. All of it came together in this performance. She realized that music had always been a part of her identity, and that keeping it hidden had been a denial of who she truly was. Now, for the first time in a public setting, She was embracing that identity fully, and it felt exhilarating. The atmosphere in the room had shifted completely. The gentle hum of conversation had largely faded, replaced by the attentive silence of people captivated by her playing. Even the staff, who had been watching with cautious curiosity, seemed to be caught in the spell of the music. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable, a testament to the power of expression when shared authentically. She felt a sense of accomplishment, not from applause or recognition, but from knowing that she had communicated something real and meaningful. As she played, she began to notice small, intimate reactions from the crowd. A couple of children watched with wide eyes, imagining stories in the music. Some older guests leaned back, letting the melody wash over them, their expressions softening in quiet appreciation. She realized that the music had a way of touching people individually, of evoking personal memories and emotions. That realization filled her with a profound sense of purpose. She was no longer just a server in a grand hall. She was a conduit for beauty and emotion, even if only for a fleeting moment. The melodies she chose were carefully balanced between familiarity and improvisation. She drew on pieces she had played countless times alone, but she also allowed herself moments of creativity, adding flourishes and changes that reflected her current mood. The audience responded unconsciously or consciously to these subtleties, leaning in, pausing, and listening with intent. She felt the connection strengthen, a quiet but powerful exchange of energy between performer and listener. Time seemed to stretch as she continued, each note building on the last, creating a narrative without words. She thought about the people in the room, their lives, their emotions, and the possibility that her music might offer a brief moment of joy or reflection. That thought gave her courage, the reassurance that what she was doing mattered, even if only in a small way. She realized that courage and vulnerability were intertwined, and that to fully embrace one, she had to accept the other. A gentle nod from one of the guests encouraged her further, a silent acknowledgement of her skill and the impact of her music. She smiled slightly, feeling a sense of camaraderie with strangers, united by the shared experience of sound and emotion. The room, though still filled with people engaged in their own activities, had shifted subtly but meaningfully. The piano had become a center of attention, a source of wonder, and she was at its heart, creating a space where her voice could be heard without words. Her performance continued, flowing naturally from one melody to the next. She experimented with dynamics and tempo, allowing the music to breathe, rise, and fall as it wanted. She felt an intense focus, a connection to the instrument and to the audience that transcended her fears and doubts. The piano was no longer just an object. It was an extension of her emotions, a medium through which she could communicate the depth of her inner world. The music reached a point of quiet reflection, a softer passage that allowed the audience to settle into the sound. She let the notes linger, feeling their resonance fill the space, and then slowly brought the piece to a gentle close. The final notes hung in the air, a delicate echo that seemed to leave a mark on the room. She lifted her hands from the keys, a mixture of relief and satisfaction washing over her. The moment had been intense, transformative, and entirely her own. Returning to her duties, she carried herself with a newfound confidence. The trays felt lighter in her hands, the steps across the hall more purposeful. She knew that she had shared a part of herself, had expressed a hidden aspect of her identity, and had touched the people around her in a meaningful way. The experience had changed her perception of herself and her abilities. The fear that had held her back was still present, but it had been tempered by the courage she had found in the music. As the event continued, she remained attentive to her duties, but she also carried the memory of her performance with her. She realized that the act of embracing her talent, even briefly, had opened a door to new possibilities. The music had allowed her to step beyond the constraints of her role, to connect with others in a profound and unexpected way. She understood that this was only the beginning, and that her courage and skill could continue to grow if she allowed herself to follow them. The moment had been fleeting, but its impact was lasting. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had taken a risk, embraced her talent, and shared it with the world. The piano had become more than an instrument. It had become a symbol of her potential, her courage, and the power of self-expression. She walked among the guests with a quiet sense of pride, aware that the music had changed not just the room, but also herself. The young woman had returned to her duties after her third performance, but the memory of the music still lingered in the air, as if it had imprinted itself on the room. Each time she moved among the guests, she could feel the lingering attention, the subtle shift in energy. People were talking in softer tones, their movements slower, as if the piano's melody had created a pause in the usual flow of conversation. It was a strange but wonderful feeling, knowing that her music had the power to shape the atmosphere. She walked carefully, carrying trays and responding to polite requests, but her mind kept returning to the piano. She knew that she could not resist the call for long. There was an opening now, a moment when the crowd had settled, and the curiosity in the room seemed to be growing. It was a delicate moment, and she understood the risk she would take by stepping forward again. Yet, the desire to play, to share her gift, was stronger than her fear. She felt a thrill in the thought of letting the music fill the hall once more. With careful steps, she approached the piano again. The keys gleamed under the soft lighting, each one holding a promise of expression. Her heart raced, her fingers itching to move across the familiar surface. She reminded herself that this was not just about showing skill. It was about sharing a part of herself, connecting with the people around her, and embracing the courage she had found in the previous performances. The tension in her shoulders eased slightly as she prepared to play, letting her mind focus entirely on the music. As she began, she allowed a richer, more complex melody to unfold. The notes were confident, expressive, and flowing, each one carrying emotion that could not be captured in words. The sound filled the room, drawing attention immediately. Heads turned, conversations paused, and the subtle hum of the crowd was replaced by the resonance of the piano. She could see the first signs of astonishment on the faces around her. The way people leaned in, their expressions softening in awe. The music had transformed the room once again, and she felt a surge of satisfaction and courage. Children stopped playing and turned toward the piano, their eyes wide and full of wonder. Some guests closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them, as if they were carried away to another place by the melody. Even those who had been distracted or preoccupied with conversations now seemed to be captivated. The transformation was undeniable. Her music had the power to slow time, to command attention, and to draw people into a shared moment of beauty and emotion. She felt a deep connection to the room, an invisible thread linking her to everyone who listened. Her fingers moved with increasing confidence, exploring the full range of the piano. She experimented with dynamics and tempo, letting the music swell and recede like waves. Each variation seemed to capture a different mood, a different emotion, reflecting both her internal state and the atmosphere in the hall. She could sense the audience responding subtly to the changes, leaning forward, tilting their heads, and holding their breath. The room had become a living entity, responding to her music, and she was at the center of it. As she continued, she noticed the staff watching from a distance, their expressions a mix of surprise, admiration, and disbelief. She realized that her music was no longer a secret. It had begun to create a ripple effect, reaching people beyond the immediate audience. She felt a sense of empowerment, knowing that she had transformed her hidden talent into something tangible, something that had an impact on others. The fear that had once held her back was still present, but it had been replaced largely by exhilaration and a sense of purpose. She allowed herself to play more freely, letting the melody soar and exploring the emotional depth of each phrase. The music became a narrative, telling a story of longing, courage, and triumph without a single word. She could feel the energy of the room shifting with each note, a collective response that was both silent and profound. Guests who had initially been reserved now leaned in, captivated by the skill and passion in her playing. Even those who had been distracted moments before were now fully attentive, caught in the spell of the piano. She noticed a few guests whispering to one another, pointing subtly toward the piano, their faces illuminated by surprise and admiration. It was a quiet acknowledgement of her talent, yet it felt significant. The realization that people were genuinely moved by her music filled her with joy. She understood that this was more than a performance. It was a connection, a shared experience that transcended words. The room had become a space where emotions could be felt collectively, and she was the instrument through which it happened. The melody evolved, becoming more intricate and expressive. She allowed herself to take risks, to add flourishes and variations that reflected her personal style and emotions. The audience responded unconsciously, their attention unwavering, their faces showing awe and appreciation. She felt a sense of liberation, a release from the constraints that had bound her for so long. The piano was no longer just a hidden friend in her apartment. It was a conduit for connection, for expression, and for the courage she had found within herself. The room seemed to hold its breath as she played, the air charged with anticipation and emotion. She could feel the collective focus of the audience, the way each person was drawn into the music in their own way. Some closed their eyes, letting the melody evoke memories and feelings. Others watched intently, captivated by the technical skill and emotional depth of the performance. She felt a sense of fulfillment unlike anything she had experienced, knowing that she had the power to create such a moment. Her fingers danced across the keys, exploring the full range of the instrument. Each note was deliberate, each chord a statement. The music carried a sense of urgency and passion, reflecting both her inner world and the energy of the room. She could sense the audience responding, leaning in, holding their breath, and sometimes even murmuring softly in appreciation. The effect was almost magical, a testament to the power of music to move and unite people. As the piece reached its climax, the room seemed to vibrate with energy. The guests were fully engaged, their attention captured completely by the piano. She could feel the connection between herself and the audience, a silent communication that transcended language. Each note became a bridge, linking her emotions to theirs, creating a shared experience that was intimate and profound. She realized that her talent was not just for herself. It had the power to touch others, to inspire, and to move them. Gradually, she brought the music to a gentle conclusion, the final notes lingering in the air like a delicate echo. The room remained quiet for a moment, as if savoring the last remnants of the melody. Then, slowly, a soft murmur of appreciation spread through the crowd. Some guests smiled, some nodded in recognition, and a few whispered words of admiration. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that she had made a meaningful impact, even if no one knew her story or her name. Returning to her duties, she moved among the guests with a quiet confidence. The trays felt lighter, her steps more purposeful, and her interactions more genuine. She had experienced something transformative, something that had altered her perception of herself and her abilities. The music had not only changed the atmosphere of the room, but had also awakened a new understanding of her own courage and potential. She knew that she had taken a risk, yet it had been worth every moment. The young woman continued to serve with attentiveness and care, but her mind kept returning to the piano. The memory of the performance, the reactions of the audience, and the feeling of connection lingered, a source of inspiration and motivation. She understood that this was only the beginning of her journey, that her talent and courage could continue to grow, and that each moment of expression had the potential to create profound impact. The experience had taught her that sharing her gift was not just about recognition. It was about connection, courage, and the joy of giving something meaningful to others. As the event drew on, she allowed herself to reflect quietly on what had transpired. The music had revealed a side of herself that had long been hidden, a part that was both vulnerable and strong. She realized that the act of playing, of taking the risk to share her talent, had been transformative. It had changed the room, yes, but it had also changed her, instilling a sense of confidence, self-respect, and possibility that she had never known. The piano was no longer merely an instrument. It was a symbol of her courage, her creativity, and her ability to touch the lives of others through the universal language of music. The young woman returned to her duties after her fourth performance, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Her heart still raced from the adrenaline of playing, yet a deep sense of satisfaction settled within her. The piano had become more than just an instrument. It was a channel for her emotions, a voice that allowed her to communicate what words could not express. She moved carefully through the crowd, carrying trays, responding to polite requests, but every step was lighter than before. She felt as though a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. As she continued, she noticed the subtle changes in the room. Guests who had been talking casually now listened with quiet attention, a respectful acknowledgement of the music she had shared. A few people whispered to one another, pointing discreetly toward the piano, as if to share a secret of the moment they had just witnessed. She felt a surge of warmth and pride. Even though she had not sought recognition, the understanding that her music had moved people filled her with a profound sense of purpose. The manager approached her cautiously, a mixture of surprise and curiosity on their face. They had clearly noticed the effect her music had on the room. Instead of scolding her, they gave a subtle nod, an unspoken acknowledgement that what she had done was special. She felt a rush of relief and validation. The risk she had taken had not only been accepted but silently appreciated. It reinforced the realization that sometimes courage required defying the boundaries of expectation, and that such acts could create moments of genuine connection and admiration. As the event progressed, she noticed several guests approaching the piano, asking for permission to see who had created such captivating music. The attention was gentle, respectful, and filled with genuine curiosity. When they saw her sitting quietly, a simple server with a shy smile, they were astonished. The contrast between her role and the music she had produced amazed them. She felt a quiet pride, a humble recognition that her talent had transcended appearances and expectations. The connection was immediate and sincere, and she realized that sharing her music had created a bridge between herself and people she had never met. The guests began to compliment her softly, praising the skill, emotion, and presence she had displayed. Their words were kind, thoughtful, and encouraging. She felt a glow of satisfaction but also a deep humility. It was not just about her playing. It was about the impact she had created, the joy and wonder she had shared. Each compliment reinforced the value of taking risks, of allowing oneself to shine even when it seemed impossible. She understood now that courage and vulnerability could coexist, creating something meaningful for both the performer and the audience. Children who had paused to watch her earlier now returned to their parents, eyes wide with excitement, whispering about the music they had just heard. The soft reactions of the guests, combined with the innocent awe of the children, made the young woman feel the weight and beauty of what had happened. She realized that music had a unique power to touch hearts across age and experience. In that moment, she understood that her gift was not just a personal joy but a shared experience that could create lasting impressions and memories. As the evening continued, she found herself reflecting quietly on the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the countless hours she had spent practicing alone, the moments of doubt and frustration, and the secret joy she had always found in music. She remembered the first time she had discovered her love for the piano, the hours she had spent learning each note, and the solace she had found in its melodies. Now, she saw that all of those moments had been leading to this, that her persistence, passion, and courage had culminated in a shared expression of art. The attention she received was not overwhelming but meaningful. Guests lingered to express their admiration, asking thoughtful questions about her training and experiences. She responded with quiet grace, recognizing that her story, combined with her music, had created a human connection that went beyond the typical interactions at such events. She felt a renewed sense of self, understanding that her talent and courage had opened doors to opportunities she had never imagined. The piano had also given her a new perspective on her role in the world. She realized that her job as a server, which had seemed limiting and routine, was now intertwined with her ability to express herself and connect with others. Each small act of service had the potential to intersect with her passion, creating moments that were both practical and profound. The blending of these aspects of her life gave her a sense of fulfillment that went beyond recognition or praise. It was about the joy of being fully present, fully expressive, and fully herself. She began to notice other staff members observing her quietly, their expressions a mixture of surprise and admiration. Some approached to offer small compliments, acknowledging the bravery and skill she had displayed. The acknowledgement from her peers was subtle but deeply meaningful. She understood that her courage had not only impacted the guests but had also inspired those around her. It reminded her that acts of self-expression and talent could ripple outward, affecting people in ways that were unexpected and significant. As the event neared its close, she allowed herself a final moment at the piano. She played a soft, reflective piece, letting the music linger in the room one last time. The notes were gentle, full of emotion, a quiet farewell that left a lasting impression on the audience. She felt a profound connection to the people around her, sensing their appreciation and respect. The experience was transformative, leaving both her and the guests with a memory that would not easily fade. The final applause was soft but genuine. The guests had been moved, and their appreciation was heartfelt. She felt a mix of humility, pride, and gratitude. The risk she had taken, the courage she had shown, had resulted in something deeply rewarding. She realized that talent was most powerful when shared, and that true expression required stepping beyond fear and hesitation. The music had bridged gaps, inspired admiration, and created a shared moment of beauty. After the event, she returned to her small apartment, the memory of the evening vivid in her mind. She sat by her own piano, fingers hovering over the keys, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. The experience had changed her, not just in confidence, but in understanding the importance of embracing her gifts and sharing them with the world. She realized that her music was a bridge to connection, a source of joy, and a testament to courage. In the following days, opportunities began to emerge. Guests who had been present at the event sought to hear more of her music, offering invitations to small performances and gatherings. She accepted cautiously at first, aware of her humble beginnings, but also with a sense of excitement. The recognition she received was validating, yet it did not define her. What mattered most was the courage she had discovered, the connections she had made, and the joy she had found in sharing her talent. Her life began to change in subtle but meaningful ways. The confidence gained from that single night extended into other areas, influencing the way she approached challenges, relationships, and her own ambitions. She understood that talent, when embraced and expressed, could open doors, create bonds, and inspire both herself and others. The piano had been a silent companion for years, but now it had become a symbol of possibility, courage, and the beauty of taking risks. The young woman continued to play, each note carrying the memory of that transformative night. She knew that her journey was just beginning, that each opportunity to share her music was a chance to touch lives and explore her own potential. The event had shown her that expression, courage, and authenticity were more powerful than fear or doubt. She had discovered the strength to reveal her hidden talent and the joy of seeing it celebrated in ways she had never imagined. In quiet moments, she reflected on the lessons learned. She understood that life often presents unexpected opportunities, and that courage means seizing them even when fear is present. Her music had given her a voice, a presence, and a means to connect with others in ways that transcended words. It had taught her the value of self-expression, the importance of embracing one's gifts, and the transformative power of sharing what lies within. The impact of that night continued to ripple through her life. She found herself more confident, more willing to take risks, and more attuned to the beauty of connection and expression. The piano had been the catalyst, but the change had been within her. She knew that her talent, combined with courage and authenticity, could create moments of wonder, inspiration, and lasting human connection. The experience had given her not just recognition, but a profound sense of fulfillment and purpose. As she played in the quiet of her apartment, she smiled, remembering the faces of the audience, the awe and appreciation, and the quiet energy that had filled the hall. She understood that the journey was ongoing, that each note, each performance, was an opportunity to grow, connect, and inspire. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a part of her identity, a source of courage, and a bridge to the world. She had been ordered to serve, but through her music, She had truly found her voice, touched hearts, and discovered a new horizon of possibilities.